Mr. Giraffe, Chris Jarvis. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Nick. How about you?
I'm doing great. So, for listener's sake, this is the next episode of Hear It from the Pen, which is part of the Yellow Book Road podcast that we have in Insurance Nerds, where in the Hear It from the Pen series, we talk specifically to authors and get a little bit more, go into Oprah detail, get a little bit more of, okay, what went into this. So we're going to be speaking to Chris about his newest book, Be the Giraffe. But anyone that knows Chris, and if you're an insurance nerd, that Chris has been a part of this community for a while. He was actually the keynote at one of our events at Gamma Iota Sigma in Dallas. Chris is a multi-time author, and he just told me I don't have anywhere near the amount of books that he's actually published. So I got three, but apparently you have
19.
19. Jesus. Okay. Chris, who are you?
Apparently, I'm someone who's overcompensating by writing 19 books. So I'll start with that. Uh,
Overcompensating for what? And
that's
time
you
for
don't have
another
enough
story.
you don't have enough time, and I'm not sure that
Yeah.
people need to connect with me that much. But it's the real thumbnail background. Mathematician, actuary, P&C actuary on that side. Decided I did not want to be an insurance executive. I did launch a couple insurance companies for one of the largest captive companies for one of the largest auto manufacturers in the world. As a 26-year-old kid with a 250-second attention span, working for a company with a 250-year business plan was a really horrible match. So I went back to business school, gave up my insurance career, burned all the boats on the way, and then got there only to find out that I was infinitely unemployable when I took my Myers-Briggs, and they're like, "You're an entrepreneur." And I said, "I don't have an idea." They said, "You should probably find one."
Yeah.
So
Try.
and then that's where I went. So my journey started 1996, UCLA at business school, and started looking for things to do, and a business that changed a million times. A lot of twists and turns, and the path was not straight for very long at all, and got to where I am now. So I get paid an outrageous amount of money to solve very complicated problems for very successful business owners, for wealthy families. Everybody has advisors, and I get brought in to solve those challenges. So their financial challenges, their business challenges, their psychological challenges. There's a lot that goes into it. So it's been a long road the last 30 years, and it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah. So this is the first book I got, Six
Okay.
Secrets. And that was my understanding of who you were as a person and why you were writing books was that in this entrepreneurial journey, you were rubbing elbows, right? Like you were seeing some of your clients were billionaires.
Mhm.
You were seeing some really successful people. And I think this is Chris, your actuarial background probably came in handy here. You were able to, at least from a probabilistic standpoint, deduce like what are the common things that are going on here, the successful traits to leverage success.
Yep.
That I think you would agree that is emerged as like I think a really big feather in your cap in that not only are you successful, but you've seen how others have been successful and you can translate that to the common person on there are just certain things you're gonna if you want to be uber successful, there are just certain things you have to do. Can you talk about that arc? Or at
Yeah,
least
no,
like
no, I'll
when
do
you
it.
realized like, oh shoot, I'm being exposed to some really serious stuff. Like when did that happen?
Listen, I'll tell everybody who's listening, success is a series of happy accidents, and the path is extremely crooked, and um, it's crooked, it's unusual. I was just telling someone the other day that I know two people who, as children, knew what they wanted to do, and they still do that thing. Like they actually do the thing they thought they were going to do. Like two, and I've met hundreds of thousands of people. And the path is really, I'd say that I've become successful because I'm very curious. I was the annoying kid who asked a lot of questions to the point that perhaps my parents got divorced because I asked so many goddamn questions. Like that I may have a hand in that. They wouldn't say so, but I know that I asked a lot of questions. And the most important thing about questions is the listening to the answers and listening to what's said and also listening to what's not said. So if I take all of that, I was 26 years old. I wrote my first book, because we were working with physicians. And as a 26-year-old, how the hell am I going to get somebody who's 46, 56, or 66 to hire me when I really don't know much? And somewhere between the ages of 18 and 26, I realized there was a lot I didn't know. And I had to do something. So it was, let me just show up and throw up everything I know and I've learned about asset protection, tax, insurance, investing, business planning, estate planning, you name it. I figured out all of it, wrote about it, had really long books that were probably 150,000 words, 200,000 words, just proving how smart I was so somebody would actually hire me. And so that's where I started. It grew, changed. I met more people. I asked questions. I paid attention. I looked for answers. I looked for people who could provide the answers. And eventually, in the finance world, what I realized was nobody wants to buy insurance. So let's just leave that. That's a terrible thing to do, to try and sell insurance. I realized that everything in the investment world was a promise based on the past and then an apology based on the world not going as you thought. So I didn't gravitate toward investment management at all, though I've owned a couple different RIAs. I realized tax was a place that was an easy place to prove your benefit. So if you met me and when we were done, you were paying $50,000 a year or less in tax, or 500,000 or a million or whatever the number was, I could quantify that. And as a young person, I thought, I'm going to sell with spreadsheets. I'm just going to show you what I can do. And I made thousands and thousands of pitches to wealthy people, which landed dozens of clients. So my hit rate was very low. And but because I was looking at tax, two things I know are true. People who make a lot of make people who want to save a lot of taxes make a lot of money. People who make a lot of money do a lot of wacky stuff. And so I have a PhD in wacky shit. That's what I have. And so I saw all these cool business models. And so that math brain of constantly not just solving the problem, but trying to solve the problem all the ways that you can so that you can find the most elegant solution to a problem. That's how my brain works. I was the kid who finished I'd finish the math segment in, I don't know, 6 minutes, 9 minutes. It was just a gift. But I took that quick processing speed, if you will, to all these other problems, but I had to actually get the data. There was no internet when I started my first job in 1991. We had to wait in line for the bullpen to use the computer and use programs like WYSIWYG and some other stuff. And I learned interesting business models. And what I also learned was that all these financial decisions were psychological decisions. They weren't math, they weren't number decisions. And so that's part of identifying patterns. The Rain Man-esque psychology is heavily weighted in these decisions. You really need to understand the people more than you need to
Yeah.
understand.
Oh God, there's a massive lesson there that is so important. What I heard you say is that you've come across thousands of really successful people and
Mhm.
they make decisions based off of emotion.
All the time. The emotion is the thing that drives successful people. Most people who are really successful have come from some tragedy. I was talking to a friend yesterday who was talking about special operators and people he's dealt with, and he said all of the ones that he's dealt with all had some trauma and they dealt with some pain. And then the conversation went to my time living in LA and meeting a lot of people in entertainment, whether it's entertainment or it's stand-up comedy or it's special operations and things in the military or it's startup founders. There's a lot of failure. And you really get to a place where fear is not an issue because the fear of the failure, the fear of the pain, you're already familiar with the pain. So it doesn't scare you the way it would scare somebody else. Nobody in their right mind, I would say, nobody who's truly well adjusted chooses entertainment, comedy, special operations in the military, startup business, because no one in their right mind would volunteer for that type of shit in their life unless they were used to dealing with that. There was a comfort for it because it's not easy. And I can tell you a story from business school that Luke Weicker, who started Bristol Farms, he did a couple interesting inventions when he was there, like the keypad. at the grocery store. When that started, it used to be dial-up. And for those of you old enough to remember dial-up with all the sounds, which I can't make, it would take a long time so you could check out, but it took longer to pay with a credit card than it did to pay with a check because you had to dial up and reach it. And you know, one of the things he started very is one of, he did a lot of things. This is just one of the interesting ones was he said, why don't we just run the card before? Start the process while we're checking somebody out. And he thought like that. He was a really brilliant guy that he had cancer and decided, yeah, cancer's got to be the body cells acting irrationally. So if they're acting irrationally, it's got to be a mental thing. So if it started with, if cancer is a mental construct, then curing cancer will also be a mental construct. And he gave up treatment and just willed his way to curing his cancer. Super fascinating guy. But now that I wasted a minute of your life with that story, when he was speaking at UCLA, he was telling everybody that the key to successful entrepreneurship is to learn to shave on someone else's face, to learn on someone else's dime. He was essentially telling everybody, don't do it. Go work for somebody, learn the business, get the clients, and then when you leave, it'll be easy. You'll leave, you'll take your best people with you, you'll take your best customers, and you've already feathered your bed, and it's an easy transition. So when it was done, there were, I don't know, a half dozen of us from the Entrepreneur Association and some of the attendees sitting there taking question and answers with Lou. And he looked over at me, and as the conversation wasn't really directed at him, he said, how was that for you? And I said, yeah, I really didn't care for it. I said, I'm doing my own thing, and I just didn't find your advice very helpful. And he could see I was a little twerked. And he turned away so that it was like his mouth to my, I was on his right to his left ear. And he said, you're going to be fine. This talk wasn't for you. It was for the rest of these people who think that this is easy and it's glamorous, and it's not. So I'm just trying to warn them from going into entrepreneurship. He's, but you'll be fine. And he winked at me. And I was like, God, I was MFing this guy. And then in one moment, he just was like, you're going to be fine. Like, you're an entrepreneur. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurship is a thing that's born out of, it's born out of, I think, fear and pain and overcompensation. And I wrote all these books. And for a lot of people, I would say that you didn't choose the entrepreneurial life, it chose you. And I think it's very similar. Yeah, I also think it's very similar with book writing. Again, you don't need to write 19.
I think that's a fabulous segue because I do think there's a book in everyone, at least a story, right? Where they're capable of getting it out is a different story. And I think that's where I want to go here is for our audience. We have I get quite a few folks who approach me about wanting to write a book. I think they fall into a lot of the stereotypes that occur around what book writing is or what it could be. You can't write 19 books unless you begin to develop some sort of acumen and comfort for the discomfort. It is not an easy process to do it. And hint, hint, even AI is not going to save you here, right? It'll do some work, but it's not going to save you here. So talk about how did you get comfortable being uncomfortable writing the book?
Yeah.
What is your process when you develop an idea and you finally burn the bridges behind you? I'm committing to this thing. What's that look like? That arc?
The career started, I think, for the wrong reason. Like a lot of things, sometimes you do the right thing for the wrong reason. And or we make mistakes and we fail forward and then we figure life out. The beginning was I was young and I wanted people to think I was older and more successful. So I wrote books so that you would think I was great. This is this is mid 90s. So before Zoom, there's a little bit of internet. Not everybody has it. And content was king. And I wrote books, which allowed me to write articles and magazines, which then allowed me to speak at industry events. And I've probably done 1,000. I did it just so you would think you would know how smart I am. That's really why I did it. And I did it to drive business. I did it to make
Can,
money. So, oh, you wrote a
can,
book.
can I reframe that? Because this is when someone approaches me and talks to me, I say I'm not going to discourage you from writing a book, but what is it that you're trying to accomplish? And when they say, I want to make a little bit of money, I'm like, that's the wrong reason to write a book. I think the right reason for most people that are listening to this is exactly what you say. I'll call it establishes credibility. Like there it is on paper, you stuck your neck out You've
Right.
delivered an opinion or some sort of wisdom or insight, and you're willing to stand by it, even if it's controversial, provocative.
Yeah, some people, if you write Harry Potter, you can make a lot of money, sure. If you're, it's possible, but if you're writing nonfiction and you're not famous, you will not become famous from your book. I released 3 books this year. Yes, 3. I had a busy year, but I don't know what I'm into those 3 books. I'm into it for over $250,000 of my money. And I've done this and I've done it well. And I know the pieces and I know the time. And writing a book is hard. And writing a book is only half the work of getting the book published because the
Yeah.
layout, all the pre-publishing stuff, it's the editing, it's a ton of work and it's expensive. And you can't edit your own book. And you want it to look good. And then once the book's published, that's like a third of the work to actually getting the book read by anybody other than your mother. And
You gotta
so
sell it. You gotta
yeah,
market and sell it. Yeah.
and it's really hard. These 3 books, I think I've sent out over 7,000 free copies in the last few months. So I'm spending money when I send the books out. I had to print them, ship them to my house, then I ship them out to people. In the beginning, the book was to show people how smart I was. Then I wrote some books and allowed some people to piggyback as co-authors with me. I did it to help them move their career along, which that may not have been the best idea. Most recently, the book that we'll talk about today, Be the Giraffe, it's the best thing I've ever written by a lot. I will guarantee it will sell 1 million copies, whether it takes 2 years or 20 years, I don't know. But it's My To Kill a Mockingbird. It's great. And the difference between this book and most of the other books is those books were meant to make me money. This book was meant to absolutely help the reader. And the other part of it was the old books were let me take ideas in my head or things that I practically use and tell you how they work. The Be the Giraffe book is really interesting in that it teaches 14 stories about a giraffe. And then how do you apply that story to your personal life so you can excel in life? And then how do you apply it in your business so that you can excel in business? And so this book, early books, was a bit of a highlight reel. Look how smart I am and all the cool stuff I've done. This book is much more about giraffe being the only animal that evolved to become more vulnerable, literally sticks its neck out. Um, but the trade-off is it gets to see things others can't. It reaches things others won't. It has a very different perspective on things. Um, it has more freedom, which I can get into later, and to move different places and do different things. And so this book is more of a here are the stories from me and my clients, but not as a look at me, but more as a relatability type, let me pull out of you. So you're going to read this book, Nick, and you're going to get something out of it different than my 16-year-old daughter, different than my 78-year-old mother, different than my 53-year-old wife. Like because this book draws out of you your experience, your feelings, your thoughts, so that you can see yourself. It's inviting you to take the stories and experiences that I have with the giraffe metaphor and then using that to help you put yourself in the book. So it's not really a choose your own adventure book, but it's in a more traditional sense, but it's very much leaning into the reader's life. And so I've had dozens of people literally call me, not just emails, text messages on LinkedIn, all of that, but call and say, I don't know how you wrote this book, which leaves me a little bit, curious why. And they said, because I feel it was written directly for me. And it's not because I found some universal truths as much as I found a way to help you tap into your thoughts, your feelings, your fears, your vulnerabilities, your things so that you can frame it. So it's very different. The book
Yeah.
has no call to action, which is hire me. It's there to help you and find your path so you stop doing the things that the biggest thing is chapter 1 is break free from the herd. And it's let's get your head out of the weeds actually is the first one. And that's the idea is zebra, wildebeest, they're eating grass. They're in these big herds for protection. And they really have no idea what's going on other than the fact that they're eating. And when the herd moves, they move. And I feel like that is the most troubling part of America today is that people just do what other people do, whether it's social media or whichever political party you follow. Everybody thinks this person is good or thinks this person is bad, or everybody thinks the vaccine is good or they think the vaccine is bad, or they think that what's going on at the border is good or they think it's bad, or whatever the hell the thing is. I don't have a problem with people having opinions. In fact, I just wish they'd have their own opinion and not. I feel like the downfall of society. I was at the gym at one day and I looked up and they had 7 different screens on that ranged from CNBC to Fox News to all the different sports channels and talk shows. And what I actually watched was all these people. There wasn't a single human being who was sitting at these cardio machines that was actually watching something happen. They were watching people talk about something that they saw happen. And I thought, how pathetic is it that we're looking to other people for? There also had been a debate the night before. And people were talking about the debate. So now you have news people talking about the news, people talking about the debate, sports people talking about the sporting event. No one's actually watching the debate or watching the event. They're watching other people to get opinions. And I thought, God, that sucks. Like we have a brain. Why don't we use them?
That's a very common phenomenon on internet apps where people might share an article or a video and nobody actually reads the article or
Or
watches the
watches the
video,
video in its entirety. They just forward it
but
because, yeah.
yeah, they forward it or on social media. And listen, I have a habit of doing this as well, like going right to the comments. Like I will get the summary or some summary, but there's no guarantee that I'm going to get the objective summary. I'm going to get someone's view through their prism of
Yep.
what that summary is.
Yeah,
So it,
and how do you know where they are, right? Unless you know the person and you know their story, 2 different people can have a completely different view
yeah,
of an event and both be right because of the context and the lens through which they look, which is colored by the experiences they've had in their lifetime. So there are people who love German Shepherds and they breed them and they think it's great and it's their thing. And if you're a policeman and you have a policewoman and you have a dog, it's a German Shepherd who protects you and it's like your bonus partner. When I was 5, I was almost killed by a German Shepherd. We have very different views of the German Shepherd, right? It's not a, I don't run around trying to kill them. I just don't, I would never think to have one as a pet because when I was 5, you got attacked and it was a unfortunate event. But just as an example, it's a scary thing for a 5-year-old to nearly die.
yeah,
And then how does that frame your views on, I'm a dog, I do have dogs, but little lemon beagles, but I, your life can color and both opinions can be right. The dog almost killed me. My daughter was also, one of my daughters was bit by a German Shepherd at one time, separate dog, many years apart, 1,000 miles apart. And somebody else I'm sure has had their life saved by a German Shepherd. So it's okay, you can have opinions about German Shepherds or about anything. So really that whole getting your head out of the weeds is let's stop for a minute and figure out what it is that I'm doing in my life. Why am I doing it? And is it serving me? And just that stop. And when I created the wow factor, which everybody who's taking this, it's a $20 assessment. You get a 19-page custom report. It's free for you on my website if you use the code NERDS. So you can use it, take it, get it. You'll figure out if you're an eagle, elephant, monkey, dolphin, penguin. It's going to help you assess your life and your behaviors in the categories of money, health, career, relationships, and fun. And I do that because I start every speech with it when I'm live. I make everybody take it. I might blow 7 minutes of my 45 to 90 minutes or whatever I might have for a keynote on this because I want to create context. Let's not do what Jarvis is telling you to do. Let's listen to what he's suggesting, but the context is what's going on in your life, Nick Lamparelli, and then figure out will what I'm sharing with you help you improve an area of your life that's actually important to you today. And if you can't figure out what that is, then just shake the etch a sketch and move on to the next speaker. But it's got to be the things that we do have to serve us.
yeah.
And you were holding up 6 secrets earlier. The whole thing behind 6 secrets to leveraging success is The thing that got you where you are today is the same exact thing that's holding you back from getting to the next level. And that's a really important thing. Just that I'm going to take control
That
of my own destiny. I'm going to I'm going to do everything. I'm going to be hands-on. If I want it done right, I'll do it myself. And yeah, that attitude can get you to 200,000, 300,000, $400,000 of income. It can get you there. It will not get you to 3 million because you won't delegate, you won't look at leverage, you will limit yourself. And that's just one example, but that thing
yeah,
that got you there, not trusting people. Yeah, not trusting people kept you from getting mugged or beat up, but it kept you from having a deep connected relationship, intimate relationship with somebody who's could bring your life to a different level.
yeah, that was a takeaway from your keynote when we were in Dallas. I specifically remember that you were saying you to make 400 to $500,000, you can do that with a degree. Like you can become a doctor or a lawyer and make 400, $500,000. You can be an SVP or a VP or an EVP or a CEO and make that kind of money. But then there's more that's out of your control. And when you get to, if you want to get to seven figures or eight figures of income, it's a completely different beast. And a lot of things are out of your control. And you need to. I had a conversation with my sister-in-law who was just like, how does Elon Musk run all of these businesses? And I'm like, I don't know if he's technically running them. He's important to him, but he's got people he trusts. Her next question was like, how do you find that many people that you could trust to run billion-dollar businesses? But you, like, as you said, you have to delegate. And that's a giraffe move. That a herd move is like, what can I do to create stability? That's a giraffe move because you are now very vulnerable. You have to rely on other people. And those other people can hurt you. They can stab you in the back. So there's a degree of being a giraffe. Like you brought up vulnerability. There's a degree, people misunderstand that, but you have to become vulnerable if you want to become super successful because there's only so much that's in your control.
Yeah, and let's not to bring it back, I guess to bring it back to math because I don't know anything else, but well, that's a lie. But the,
Tesla's.
the proof, yeah, the proof to this is anything that is worth doing, anything that is going to reward you financially or reward you in any way is going to require some level of risk. Because if it weren't difficult, everybody would do it and it wouldn't be worth anything. So, starting a new business, running a new company, entering a new market, launching a new product, starting a new relationship, moving in with somebody, getting married, whatever the having kids, any of these vulnerable moves, you have no idea what's going to happen. You can try things, but all of those things, if you don't know how to do it, it's you have to expect that you're going to fail. And if there's anything that's foolproof does not have a high reward to it because it just doesn't. There's nothing you can do that's risk-free that's really that fantastic. It just isn't. And so if you're
No.
going to do something new and exciting, you have to expect to fail at least once. Think about the first time you did anything. First time you rode a bike, how'd that go?
Not good.
The first time you tried to walk, how many times did you fall? The first time you tried to swim, the first time you anything. It just there's nothing. It's
No,
just it's just
it's and
not right.
it's sad. It's sad because I hear my kids and one of them is becoming a musician. And when he tries a new instrument, he gets immediately frustrated. And he's now aware of his surroundings and he's aware of failure. But as a child growing up, falling down and getting right back up, like there's no big deal. Fell down and get right back up until you learn how to walk, until you learn how to run. I wonder where that gap occurs where people become from they're aware that failure creates like some kind of stigma and they're just afraid to try. Because
So
adults, Chris, as adults, that's a killer.
for a lot of people, social media is not helping anybody. I mean, I check my social media monthly, like maybe. I just don't look at it. The best piece of advice I ever got, I'm just going to go off on a little bit of a tangent. I read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Work Week. In the second half of the book, toward the end, actually, he gives a lot of practical advice, and one of them is to turn off all your notifications. So I can tell you, my phone has not rung in 10 years. It doesn't ring, it doesn't vibrate, it doesn't go to my watch, it doesn't go to anything else. If my phone rings, I have no idea someone has called me. I have no idea someone has texted me. None. Zero. And I just check it when I check it. And so what doesn't happen for me in a conversation with someone is I never stop and check a message. I never say, hold on a second, because I'm never going to tell you that you're not important and leave that moment and be rude. I will not do it because I don't have that. I don't have it. And my phone, nothing, my screens, nothing pops up. I don't know that an email came in. I don't know that a text came in. I have no way of knowing unless I actually prop a phone up because I'm waiting for something. But the flip side of that is it used to be that when you got distracted, studies said it was a 4 to 5 minute thing for you to get back into the zone. Now the numbers show some reports are in the 17 range, some are in the 26-minute range. And I can tell you from writing books, I have to dive into it. And 8 hours of uninterrupted writing is way more productive than 21-hour sessions. So getting yourself into that headspace, you just get into, I'm in the zone for this thing. And there's a lot of subconscious stuff going on in the cache, if you will, that just allows me to think, oh, I think I wrote about that in chapter 17. I'll reference it. And then I look up and it is chapter 17. It's like, how do I know that when there's a 40 chapter book? And you're just getting your head into it. So part of this thing with people is this fear of failure is they're so afraid. I did a TED talk 2 years ago. I think it was the most watched or second most watched TED talk in the world. Surviving Ain't Thriving, Be the Giraffe. And what I talked about is that we get so caught up in people are so afraid of getting canceled, so afraid of criticism that they don't put themselves out there at all. And I think it's a huge problem. That fear
Yeah.
of my kids when they were little, they wore crazy clothes and they had personalities and they did everything. And now they look like every other kid they go to school with. They wear the same clothes and the same stuff, and it's pathetic. They're not pathetic. It's just what's happened in society, the fear of
Standing out.
the need to fit in is
Yeah.
so important. And I think it was Brene Brown who talked about, I heard her say something recently that fitting in is the opposite of being accepted. Like the opposite of
Mm.
truly connecting. And so the
Hmm.
fitting in is I want to be in your group, so I'm going to tailor my what I say and what I do and how I act so that I fit into your group versus I'm just going to be myself and you invite me in and accept me because of who I am. So I think the reason why this Be the Draft book has become so interesting for young people is, 16 to 30, which is not the target market I wrote it for. Um, I think they're finding it really helpful because they feel like they're losing their sense of identity and that they have to pick a tribe and I'm left or right, I'm blue or red, I'm Democrat, Republican. And then if I'm in that group, I have to believe everything they believe. And what about my own personal thoughts? And what about me as an individual? And what about you can be conservative and not like you could be a conservative and think that the current president may not be a very likable human being. You could be a liberal and think that the former or the outgoing president is has had some mental issues and probably should have been out of the role a long time ago. Like those are reasonable positions somebody could take. But God forbid you say those things. And it's all one way or it's all the other way. And I think people don't
Yeah.
I think there's a loss of individuality, and that's the piece that I'm not trying to get everybody in Be the Draft to start their own company and go out on a limb and quit the job and move to the mountains and
No.
but at least figure out who the hell you are and just
Yes.
ask, are the things I'm doing still serving me? And you can always say yes. I'm not saying you need to midlife crisis, get a divorce and buy the Porsche and do the thing. I'm just saying just stop. Just stop for a minute and ask yourself, what do I do? Why do I do it? Is it actually giving me what I want, or is there a better way to get what I want? Or do I want something else? Just stop and ask the question for God's sakes.
Yeah. I th So you'll, as you mentioned a couple of times, you were a mathematician and an actuary. I'm not even going to say the how do you tell the difference between an actuary and Won't even do that joke to you. But you have a more of a
I'm never mistaken as a mathematician or an actuary at 6'3" walking around the street. It's not really I don't get,
okay.
I don't get that. So I don't take any sense of, I'm not offended. You can tell all the jokes you want.
But what about empathy?
Mm,
So you're the reader that said it feels like you wrote the book for me. That's a skill. It's a skill it takes a while to
long time.
to to develop where your writing is for across the board. It can be handled, but also people feel like you've written for them. But you've had a lot of experience
Yeah.
writing. But what would you I think that's a critical element to get engagement in your writing is to have empathy. And so what would you suggest to budding authors around how they can develop that? And if the answer is practice,
No,
then
so I call, like, I built a house when I sold my company in 2016. The following year, I bought a piece of property, bought a house, built a pretty big house, and my office where I am right now is a separate building. So it's very difficult for people to make their way from the house over to here to bother me. And when I'm over here, I say I'm in the lab making things, doing stuff. This book was slow and it wasn't moving very well when I was stuck in the lab. And it took me getting out and having interpersonal communication and testing
yeah.
conversations live that I would say to people, you do need some. Jack Canfield, who's a friend of mine, he wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. He's written hundreds of books and dozens of New York Times bestsellers. And he would say the key to writing a book is butt glue. You need to glue your ass to the seat and sit there and write. Like that part is true. But I think getting your message down, the whole point of the message is not what you want to say, but if you want to have a book that's successful that people actually read, you need to understand the people who are going to be reading it and what's important to them and how does that
Mm,
work. And when I was young, I mean, this webinar is hard. Podcast is difficult because you're asking me a lot of questions. But when I'm with clients, I spend very little time talking and a lot of time listening. And that wouldn't bode well for this, much like what you're doing with me. You ask a question and I go off on a tangent for 4.5 minutes, 6 minutes. But the key is getting to know the audience, what's important to you, where are you, making clever metaphors or observations and giving people a chance to do that thing. I'd say for me, when I sold the company and I went on walkabout with Canfield for a couple of years, what I learned from Jack was I used to have a knack for one-on-one getting to the thing that mattered and asking interesting questions. When I worked with him and went through all of his coursework to understand it better, because we were going to write a book together, I learned how to reach out, how to help people find the solutions themselves. That was invaluable, was giving people the tools, not telling them and saying 97%, 93% of people believe they'd be better off if they had more money. It's a stat, it's on my website. But asking the question, what are the things you believe you could do if you had more money? The two very different states. They just have a very different approach, right? The whole, okay, now I'm one of the 93%, I get it. I wish I had more money versus what do I think I could do? If I had more money, what are the things I would do that I'm not doing now? And if you're listening to this, just think about the emotion around those two. One is just a didactic fact. The other gets you right into the things that you're not doing that you wish you could do. And they have a different impact. So I'd say for I'd say for budding authors, you got to write some stuff down, but go practice the conversation. One of the best things to do with a book
mm,
is go do talks. Offer to speak for free, speak at the library, speak to a school, speak to a senior group, speak to any organization you can, and have the conversation, do the talks, ask questions. And I can remember being in LA. Friends came to visit. They were coming in from Rhode Island. There was a big snowstorm blizzard, so they couldn't get home. So they ended up staying there for a long time. So I did every touristy thing I could do with these guys. But one night we were at the Laugh Factory or the Comedy Store, I can't remember which. And Louis Anderson had his showcase. And then when it was done, they said, okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're in LA. And I knew this kind of thing happened because I lived there. I didn't know who would show up that night. But they said, after we watched 5 comics, they said, someone just popped in and wants to do a set. Will you guys stick around for Joe Rogan? And I had seen Joe do comedy 3 or 4 times. He's great. And he was fantastic that night. And then Louis Anderson came out and said, the Laker game just got out, and one of our local favorites is working on a new special. Would you guys stick around and listen to him work through some of his material? And it was Chris Rock. And Chris Rock did his big routine. Like he did his huge show and he was practicing it. So a lot of those jokes, we watched him work on jokes where he would work through, start a joke, and then he'd say, all right, stop. All right, let's go back 3 minutes and let's try this out. And he would try a different opening to a bit and ask people what he thought. Or he'd be in the middle of a punchline and say, what if I had said it this way? What do you guys think? And so it was having like he could
And he
have
had a
used,
notebook.
he
He
had a
had
notebook.
a
He had a
notebook. He was
notebook
taking
and he was
notes.
trying, he was absolutely taking notes and working through his material and realizing that if he just wanted the applause, he could have walked in there because we paid $50 a person to see 5 or 6 comics and have a couple drinks. The fact that we saw Rogan for 40 minutes and Rock for 40 minutes at the end was great. He could have used old material and everybody would have been delighted. But he didn't go out there with that. He went out with I'm going to tell you some stuff. And he's, what do you think of that? They're like, yeah, people groan. He's, yeah, that's helpful. But he had to put himself out there in stuff that he wasn't showing his best material. He was willing to put himself out there.
Yeah, the Chris Rock example to me is the epitome of that trial and error, but that trial and error is uncomfortable. Like he's up on
Of course it is.
stage and he does not know. We're amazed when we see the Chris Rock special. Man, that dude is so funny. How does he come up with this stuff?
Yep.
Elbow grease. He comes up with this stuff by being
Yep.
uncomfortable for an extended period of time, and he's
Yep.
okay swimming in that discomfort
Well,
because it.
and for people more recently, I'll interrupt you for a second. For people more recently, the highlight of the Tom Brady roast, most people would say was Nikki Glazer, and she killed
Yep.
it.
Yep.
And Kill Tony was fantastic at the end too. But Nikki was great. And Nikki said she ran that material. She ran that material 25 times. She would go to 3 different clubs a night for a week and ran the material to see what would happen. And said I had to put myself out there and really try these jokes out and go live, even in situations where I'm making fun of people and they don't even know who they are. So I have to give context, which then makes the joke not funny. When it's okay, here I am, I'm talking to Nick, and Nick is this guy and he has insurance nerds, and I'm going to make fun of his mustache, and here we go. Like she had to do stuff, and it just was, but she said, I put myself out there. I think she said she ran it between 25 and 50 times. She ran that material on,
Oh, it and the takeaway, clearly the set was hysterical,
yep,
but she has now been on other shows where they said, "Did you have other jokes?" And you're right. Like she ran through the material and pruned it down to this is what we're going to do. So I've seen the jokes that she didn't do, and those were funny. So she was just like had to it's art, it's a craft.
for
And
sure.
I think that's probably like a good takeaway for this. I want to ask a couple more questions before we close out, but
Yeah.
I think ultimately what you're describing is if you want to be a writer, you have to enjoy the craft. You have to develop a craft for writing that's authentic to your voice.
Yeah, and that takes time. Like the first thing you write is going
Mm.
to stink. Like it just is, and that's
Yes.
okay. But there's a lot of free platforms for you to write. And it's like there was a time when I made a bet with a friend of mine who has a magazine, and I said, I can write anything. And he said, great, write my letter from the editor. I said, okay, great. What's the episode about? And I wrote about, it was like the middle of the summer. It's the Society mag in the town that I live in. And it was like about summer drinks or something. And it was like, how do you write something? And so it was, I just had to write a piece about like 7 different drinks you might drink in the summer and then equating them to a personality. Which one is the mom who's always in the gym and which one is this? And so I just did it, wrote it, and he's, oh, I hate you. But it's the willingness to go write something. And there's so many places, whether it's Medium or other places, you can write in a lot of different places. And I think the hardest part with writing too is getting shorter and shorter. And so
Yeah.
the best book I ever wrote is this one. It's 41,000 words, and I've written books that are 240,000 words. So it's how do
Yeah.
you, I used to have in my financial practice a 20 word sentence on what I did. And I help purpose-driven entrepreneurs build greater impact and this. And I had this whole long thing about what I did. And now people say, what do you do? And I say, impactful, enjoyable wealth. if we're not changing somebody's life and we're not having fun doing it, then the pursuit of money is fruitless. It makes no sense. We're wasting our lives. We should be, if we're not changing some people's lives
Yeah.
and
Well,
enjoying the journey, then everything related to money then you've been used. Like your life has been wasted.
yeah. At a minimum, I love that kind of tagline because it's not only because it's short and sweet, but it almost forces a conversation, almost forces like, what do you mean by that? Like it's natural. That was the first.
Sure.
How do you do that? And now you can have a deeper conversation with people in being a marketing agency and working with a lot of B2B firms. Like that is a huge thing that they get stuck on is they don't even know how to properly describe themselves and they want to use the cookie cutter. We're a SaaS-based cloud platform that creates business intelligence
Ah,
for like
so
Jesus.
painful. So painful. So it's where do you want to go? Like that whole, again, be the giraffe, the idea, when people say, where'd the giraffe come from? It's the only animal that evolved to be more vulnerable, not less vulnerable.
Yeah.
But as a result, it can see things others can't and it reaches heights others won't.
Yep.
And people say, that's interesting. Yeah, because it's not a book of elevate your life and make more money and be admired by millions of people. You might come to that, but life is taught through metaphor. It's the easiest. It's parables, it's fables. That's how we started. So I do have a knack for figuring out how do you find cool things and metaphors, and I've written a lot of things like that. It's so some of this is practice. The second piece is go live and actually have the conversation. The first book I wrote in 8 days, but I had but it started with 50 different articles that had been published in magazines. So I was writing 900 to 1700 word articles. And then I had a collection of them and said, okay, this is going to be the
And
backbone for the book.
and and feedback from
And
those.
feedback. That's exactly right. And which ones worked and which ones didn't. And then, so that's, yeah, just have that. And all of those conversations with people are about you figuring out what problem are you going to solve. So
Yeah.
when I do business consulting or I'm teaching entrepreneurship at a college or whatever the hell I'm doing, I usually ask people, who is your client? What problem do they have? What problem are you solving for? And do
Hmm.
they know they have the problem? Because if they don't know they have a problem, then you have a problem. Because you have to convince somebody there's a problem and convince them that you have a solution at the same time.
And convince them to not build it themselves.
Sure. Or hire somebody else or all the million other options, right?
Yeah.
So this whole thing is what problem are you solving for? Why is your solution better than everybody else's? I would say in this world of data that while everybody else is focusing on data and big data and advertising, I'm in a no advertising situation where I pay for no advertising, but I'm going with personal referrals and other things for the same reason I send books and I send handwritten notes when everybody else sends emails. I just, I'm going a different direction because I
Yeah.
want to stand out. So I know when someone goes to their mailbox and they have a 4 pound package and it has a couple of my books and a handwritten note in it, I'm not competing with the 20,846 unread messages they have in their inbox. Like they can
Love it.
open it, but that's part of if you're trying to create connection with people, then you need to create connection.
Yep. Yep. So I want to end this, Chris, with your future endeavor. Your pretty mug is going to be on television. I want to respect your time. So give us an elevator pitch on what is this thing? And of course, we will promote it. But once it happens, where can we find it?
Yeah, so I just signed a deal to do 52 weeks of Be the Giraffe TV. So BeTheGiraffe.tv should be the website where people can find the beginning of it. It is going to be on .tv, so it gets pumped into 35 million homes, weekly show. It'll air multiple times a week. It'll be on Spotify, it'll be on Apple TV and Roku and Pluto and all the other services. I start recording in a couple weeks, which is exciting. And the goal of the program is it's a 1 hour show. So long form, 4 12-minute segments, same guest for the whole thing. And we get into a problem that people have, finance, business, life problem, explain why it's so important, connect it to one of the giraffe lessons, bring the guest in, talk about their problem that they had, let them share how they solved it and what it did for their personal life, for themselves individually. and then talk about how they, when they address this problem, how they managed it in a business context and what it did for them professionally. And so this idea, how we do some things is how we do everything. If you have a problem in your home life, you have a problem at work. If you have a problem at work, you have a problem in your home life.
Hmm.
We don't compartmentalize as well as we think we do. That was a valuable lesson for me. And we take people through this whole thing, and then every lesson there'll be something, some free resource, a worksheet, workbook, videos, courses, something we're going to make available to everybody. This goal is not just to have an entertaining, interesting program, but to make sure there's a call to action that helps people elevate some area of their life, whether it's their wealth, their relationship, their self-worth, their business.
Yeah.
There'll be something that comes out of everything. I'm really excited about top down. I'm going to be able to interact with 50 really interesting people who've done amazing things, but going straight to vulnerability, and again, no highlight reels. We'll get into what did you uncover, what did you run into, how did you handle it, and what was the benefit that you got from handling it? What tips can we have, and how do we leave everybody with something? So it'll be fun working top down and unpacking some of the things they went through, with the goal of elevating the lives of millions of people and making sure that we give something away every single time we go on the air. So I'm super excited. I've done a lot of volunteer speaking, including the keynote I did for your organization. I still do that, but this is a way for me to control it a little bit and reach a lot of people. So I'm
Yeah.
excited. It's a
Okay.
really, I'm really excited about this one.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
be the giraffe.tv.
Congratulations on Be the Giraffe.tv. Congratulations on your book, parentheses S. So, folks, Be the Giraffe. I will put in the show notes links that you can get a copy and a good summary of this. And as usual, we will, for the audience sake, we will promote as soon as these shows come on. We will start promoting them. But, Chris, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule on a Friday afternoon to come here and talk to us about writing and books and giraffes.
Anytime, my friend. Anything for you and anything for the audience. So always a pleasure talking to you, Nick. And I'm happy to be a fellow nerd. I'll be here anytime I can.
Thank you, Chris.